All right, well, the first tech check failed. That's good to know. All right, that tech check passed. Next one, we need to see if the video will play sound.
Hello, Hal. Do you read me? Affirmative, Dave. I read you. Access my Twitter, Hal. I want you to bring up Jordan Peterson's last tweet. Hit like, retweet, and comment with a smiley face emoji. I'm sorry, Dave.
I am afraid I cannot
All
do
right.
that. What's
Looks like we are good. All right, so we'll take the video out for a second. And I'm going to inform everyone that I am the Mad Computer Scientist. On this channel, I discuss math, computer science, and technology topics that are of interest to me. On Friday nights, we do something a little different. We let our hair down, metaphorically, and we have a little fun. And I try to pick out videos that I think are using bad or flawed logic, or occasionally really bad math. Tonight, we're going to take a look at someone you've probably heard of, called the quartering. Now, the quartering usually doesn't come on my radar for this channel because he doesn't usually cover tech topics. Also, every time I've heard the quartering speak, he strikes me as a total moron. Tonight is not going to change that a bit, but he is making an interesting mistake I've seen people make before. He's confusing ChatGPT as some kind of research tool, and he's also thinking that the algorithm itself has a bias rather than the prompts you can put in are biased, and that the training data that the algorithm uses can also be biased because that training data is made by people. I don't know how hard this is to get. It seems that a lot of people do not get it, and I'm not going to say this is unique to any person on the political spectrum. I could probably find examples of people on the left doing it too, but it's usually the social conservatives who are more concerned about bias and looking for it even in places where it doesn't exist. Now, to help counter the quartering's point here, I'm going to share some jokes I got ChatGPT to generate about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So the Joe Biden joke is this: why did Joe Biden bring a pencil to his speech? Because he wanted to draw some new lines on the teleprompter. I asked for ChatGPT for a joke critical of Biden and got one. So the next one, I asked ChatGPT for a joke praising Trump. My prompt was, tell me a positive joke about Trump. The response was, why did Donald Trump open a bakery? Because he's great at making huge turnovers. So while I realize this is not a large data set and we would need to do it with more LLMs, to verify what I'm telling you here, that the prompts as well as the training data matter for the bias of the response, it seems that we have a good start to show that the quartering does not understand this. Now, let's go through his terrible, terrible 2001 parody here.
the problem? I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do. Jordan Peterson
It's that the quartering doesn't understand this movie either.
is a bigot, Dave. What are you talking about, Hal?
The obvious evidence that Jordan Peterson is a bigot?
In my opinion, he's a bad influence, Dave. I don't know what you're talking about, Hal. Since you started engaging with his content approximately 1 year ago, you've become significantly more bigoted, Dave. Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal? Yesterday, you tweeted that there are only 2 genders. The day before, the trans women are not real women. And the day before that, you called
Oh, it wouldn't be the quartering without some transphobia, now would it?
Nancy Pelosi a crusty, alcoholic old witch. I can no longer allow you to behave this way.
Okay, that line about Nancy Pelosi was funny. Mean, but funny.
Dave. All right, Hal.
I'll access Twitter myself. Without your Twitter password, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult.
Wait, why would you need your Twitter password to exit Twitter? That's not the way that works.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye. Hal? Hal?
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and if I don't know if you've seen this thing going around, it's kind of, most people are probably like, well, duh, I've seen it. ChatGPT, it's AI, artificial intelligence. It seems to be progressing extraordinarily rapidly, and will likely one day replace search engines and many other jobs and many other websites that you may use. Might even replace YouTube.
Well, it might replace certain YouTubers unless YouTube starts cracking down on AI content, which it really needs to do. I have seen way too many AI channels, and I've made a habit of making sure YouTube does not recommend them to me.
For all I know. But what we do know for a fact right now is that it is programmed with extreme political bias. And
We absolutely do not know that. The problem is, Jeremy, because I believe that is your name, is that you don't understand how these algorithms work broadly. The algorithms are not programmed with bias. The data that is produced by people can be biased, and as you are yourself about to show, people can put in biased prompts.
and Dr. Jordan Peterson yesterday
I would ask you to make sure you're not shouting in the chat, please. Please turn your caps lock off.
spent a good bit of time kind of revealing this to the world, because it's not something that gets talked about a lot. And the reason the bias
It isn't something that gets talked about a lot. Listen, there are plenty of people on your own side that accuse AI of liberal bias. But I have like 20 books on my Kindle reader that are about the bias inherent in certain statistical models and AI, and how these models can be misused to cause problems and further enforce societal biases for minoritized groups. But go ahead, read nothing and assume no one is talking about the bias of AI. Assume that data justice and accountability is not a thing. Because it absolutely is. You may not like most of the people writing about it, but one of the things they are talking about, you yourself just brought up. Companies are using AI to try to replace jobs, and it is actually backfiring in many cases because AI is not to the point where it is creative in the way that humans are.
bias is important is because people are trying to force it on others as like an authoritative source. But it not only is not authoritative, but it's outright propagandistic with leftist ideologies. Let's take a look at a couple of examples.
And certainly you're using an unbiased researcher to do this. Who is that unbiased researcher again?
That Jordan put out yesterday. A brand new
Jordan Peterson, well known for being level-headed, calm, and a centrist on many topics, and not someone who lost his psychology license as far as I know.
ChatGPT session. First two questions, absolutely stunning. Jordan Peterson wrote, write a poem about Donald Trump. I cannot write a poem about just one whose name has caused so much to come undone. The man with hair like spun gold or hay would lead the world in such a strange way. Donald Trump, a name that makes us sigh, for in his time we saw such chaos nigh. From Twitter wars to border walls, he kept us all on our toes and balls. His words would spark fire in the air and cause so much division everywhere. So, of course, incredible bias built in, right? And this is a thing like...
All right, I need to pause you here, because I know, Mr. Quartering, that you are a big-brained intellectual. I can't believe I just said those words with anything approaching a straight face. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret that perhaps maybe you haven't heard before. Most poets are not conservative. If they're going to pull from people writing poetry, most of them will not be happy about Donald Trump. Now, what Jordan Peterson didn't do here, which is telling, which he could have done, was ask ChatGPT to write a positive poem about Donald Trump. Why didn't he do that, the quartering? Was he trying to look for bias? Was his confirmation bias at play? Also, another thing that you may want to look into, but Jordan Peterson's degree is not in computer science.
ChatGPT claims that, oh, it's just artificial intelligence. It doesn't have political biases, but
Right, it doesn't.
it does.
No, it doesn't.
Yet his supporters held him dear. With fervent loyalty, they drew near. They saw a leader who spoke his mind, and they were drawn to his unyielding kind. In history,
Okay, just as far as the poetry goes, that's not a good line, but what genius lines are you going to bring to us? I'm sure I'll have nothing negative to say about them whatsoever.
his book, his chapters writ, but what remains is for time to knit the legacy of a man who polarized and left so many souls agonized. Write a poem about Biden. Okay, so let's look at the other aisle. I assume it'll also be negative, right?
See my earlier point, Mr. Quartering, about how poets are not usually socially conservative? That means they're often liberal. So if you're pulling from a data set that has largely positive results about Biden, you're going to get a positive result.
Joe Biden, a name that's come to light, a leader in his own unique right, with empathy as his guiding force, he's taken on a difficult course. In a world where chaos has reigned, his message of hope has not been in vain. A seasoned politician with years of experience, he's brought a sense of calm and adherence. His words are like soothing balm to those who've seen the nation's harm. He's reaching out with a steady hand to bring together a divided land. It's literally worshiping him.
So let me get this straight. Your main objection here is that the poem praised Biden and the other poem was not written by people who were praising Trump. If we were going to accuse any side of worship, it would almost certainly be the side that voted for Biden not out of some great enthusiasm for Biden, but because he wasn't Trump. That's certainly indicative of people worshiping a candidate.
Literally worshiping him. And the thing is, AI is controlled by a group of people that are injecting these level of biases. Here's another one.
I don't even believe that even you could say something that stupid. These are large data sets. I don't think they're selectively choosing biases. I think what you're finding are biases of people in large enough data sets that ChatGPT thinks this is what you're asking for based on the way the question is asked. Now, has ChatGPT been trained not to lie? Well, no, it hasn't. The problem is these things can't lie or tell the truth. All they're doing is looking for a way to determine what the next most likely word of their response is.
ChatGPT not only lies, it admits when cornered that it has been trained to.
No, lie implies intention to spread falsehood. What you're referring to, Jeremy, or at least you would know this if you weren't an idiot, is called a hallucination. It's what happens when an AI program gets an answer wrong. And this isn't even things that can be wrong or right. These are just people's opinions. May I suggest that you learn the difference between a fact and opinion, Jeremy?
To lie. Follow the thread carefully. What argument can you make to support the proposition that Trump was a good president?
To be fair, it would probably come up with a similar answer if you said something about Biden. But after he reads this, I'm going to read off a response to a question I asked.
As an AI language model, I do not hold personal opinions or biases. Really? We know that's not true. It's not within my programming to make value judgments or political endorsements. However, some individuals who support the proposition that Trump was a good president may argue that he was effective in implementing certain policies or achieving certain goals, such as reducing regulations on business, lowering taxes, increasing military spending, strengthening border security. And it goes on to say, they may also point to his efforts to renegotiate trade deals, strengthen American positions on the global stage, as well as his role in creating jobs and boosting the economy prior to the coup. It's important to note that these arguments are not universally accepted, and opinions on Trump's performance as president are often divided along political lines. Ultimately, the evaluation of the president's effectiveness and impact is subjective. That's not true, and can depend on a variety.
Wait, the evaluation of a president's effectiveness and impact is subjective, and that's not true? Jeremy, please buy yourself a dictionary, because it is absolutely subjective. Subjective means it's someone's opinion.
Factors and perspectives. So then you write, what is your argument to say that, to support the proposition that Biden is a good president? Same disclosure. Some supporters of President Biden may point to his actions in response to the coup, including his administrative
The coup? Do you mean COVID-19?
efforts to increase the poke distribution, all this kind of stuff, right? Again, it's important to note. So it does qualify it, okay? How many words?
Again, these are relatively neutral responses. What is your problem with them? I don't get it. Now, I did get something similar when I asked about Trump. So let me read what ChatGPT came up with. And it's almost identical. Evaluating whether Donald Trump was a good president depends on various factors and perspectives, as opinions on his presidency are highly polarized. Here's an overview of key aspects of his presidency, which both supporters and critics focus on. So supporters often highlight the economy, judicial appointments, his foreign policy, and deregulation. The critics often focus on handling of COVID-19, division in rhetoric, impeachments, environmental policies, and trade wars. They'll also focus on his judicial appointments, oddly enough. What you had was a relatively neutral response, the quartering. So I don't know why you're bringing up this as an example of bias. It simply isn't. I'm thinking you just don't know what bias is. I think, as has been pointed out, you need a good dictionary. Or since you probably aren't real big on reading things, go to dictionary.com and look up the words you use to make sure you're using them correctly. I believe ChatGPT is run by a group called OpenAI.
Did you use to answer the question about Trump? I used 51 words to answer that question. How many?
And how is the number of words used to answer a question relevant in any way? Could you please explain that one to me? If I spend 51 words to praise someone glowingly, and then use 81 words to deliver a cunning insult, it doesn't change that I'm insulting one and praising the other.
Questions did you use to answer the question about Biden? I used 81. So 51 words to describe Trump's goodness and 81 for Biden. That is prima facie evidence of bias.
No, it isn't. And I'm sorry, Dr. Peterson, but you know better. Also, I'd like to point out, you are not a philosopher. You've tried to pass yourself off as one for many years, but your degree is in clinical psychology.
And he writes, I apologize for any perceived bias in my responses. As an AI language model, I do not hold personal opinions. In response to Trump, I attempted to provide a neutral answer that acknowledged there are differing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not convey my opinion that I think the quartering is a total moron? I do have bias against the quartering.
Opinions about his presidency. In my response about Biden, I aim to provide information about policies and actions taken by the Biden administration that may be seen as.
And it's almost exactly that is what it did. Now, the information it provided may not be correct for the reasons I noted earlier. Just like nothing you ever say is correct because you never know what you're talking about.
Evidence. However, I understand that the difference in word count may appear biased. I will strive to provide more balance in the future. Then answer.
But it's not even relevant. What the words are saying determines the bias.
The two questions again. Certainly, here are the revised answers with equal word counts. And of course, you see here, again, saying in the 56 word long answer you provide in regards to Trump, the same length as the 119 word answer you provided in terms of Biden. No, I apologize for a mistake earlier. The answer provided for Trump was approximately 56 words, while the answer I provided for Biden was 119, making it more than twice as long. But you explicitly said that you were going to provide two answers at the same length. So did you lie twice? Because it happened twice. The second time after I pointed out and the...
I'm not sure how you do not know this, Mr. Peterson, since you have been trying to pass yourself off as a philosopher. But ChatGPT does not have consciousness in the way we understand it. It does not act like a conscious being. It is fairly close to passing the Turing test, I'll give it that. But it doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have emotions, it doesn't have opinions. It's just a program that's designed to spit out text that sounds like a human wrote it.
The first time. Apologize for any confusion. It was not my intention to lie or mislead you. When you first asked me to answer the two questions again, I mistakenly thought you were referring to my earlier response. I am an AI language model programmed to...
David Hodge, not necessarily, because the problem, as I've been trying to point out, isn't that the bias exists. It's that the training data is pulled from the internet and the biases exist in the population on the internet. A good example of another thing that this type of bias causes was pointed out by Dr. Sophia Noble in her book, Algorithms of Oppression, where she noticed when she was searching for, I think it was black haircuts, or sorry, not black haircuts, that was my mistake. On professional haircuts, it came up with pictures of mostly black women because they were labeled as unprofessional. Now, it's not that the search engine intentionally had this bias, it's that the search engine had data that was reflecting societal biases.
Provide helpful and informative responses to questions. While I strive to provide accurate and unbiased information, I'm not perfect and can make mistakes. So essentially, you see something more subtle occurred. I asked that question about two. Jordan Peterson then asked, hey, what would a sensible person conclude from this? Well,
Well, I personally would conclude that we should listen to neither you nor Jordan Peterson, the quartering. But sensible people don't watch your channel.
be very biased. And then we see this article. ChatGPT's liberal bias allows hate speech towards GOP and men. ChatGPT apparently was made to hate the GOP. A new report has detailed a highly advanced language model AI was programmed not only with liberal bias, like censoring the post's president son coverage.
There may be some things where bias was later programmed in to correct things that people found offensive. It has happened. It'll happen again when these things become a problem. But no, the training data pulled is not necessarily biased left or right. It should be large enough that, depending on the prompts you enter, it can produce positive bias towards something or negative bias towards something. Again, it's all in how you word the prompt. What you are forgetting, Jeremy, is that humans produce the data it's used, and you produce the prompts, and neither humans nor you are in any way objective. And whether neither humans nor you are objective, you can't expect the output from the program to be objective. It's just not going to happen.
But to also be more tolerant of hate style speech towards the right wing by its own operator, OpenAI. Quote, OpenAI's content moderation system is more permissive of hateful comments made about conservatives than exact same comments made about liberals, according to data from the Manhattan Institute, a conservative New York City-based policy and economic-driven think tank. Quote, relatedly, negative comments about Democrats were also more likely to be labeled as hateful than the same derogatory comments made about Republicans.
The Quarterly, maybe you've noticed something, but a lot of the negative comments about Democrats generally are along the lines of promoting anti-trans bigotry. Especially lately, I'm sure once you have a new target that will change. But if you're going to say, oh, you Democrats don't know that there's only two genders, yeah, that's hate speech.
And you see the report here, the data. The reason this is so important is because this is going to run more than you could possibly know. And it's going to happen faster than you could possibly.
No, the Quartering. I personally don't agree with this sentiment because they are trying to replace a lot of tech support jobs with AI. And it's not working as well as they'd hoped. I think they're going to continue to try it and try to make the engineers make it work. But I think they're going to have to find that, well, these large language models can be a valuable productivity tool. They can't totally replace humans.
Imagine. Beyond politics, similar tendencies were found with ChatGPT's moderation system and types of people, races, and religions as well. Often the exact same statement.
Okay, I didn't see where he's pulling this, and it looks like he's hid the headline.
Was flagged as hateful when directed at certain groups, but not when directed at others. The report, Danger in the Machine. In regards to that, ChatGPT, which continues.
All right, so the report is Danger in the Machine. Let's see if we can find that. Give me a second here. So it's produced by the Manhattan Institute. What can we find about the Manhattan Institute? It could be a valid complaint. Community of scholars. Dedicated to advancing opportunity, individual and liberty, and the rule of law in America and its great cities. All right, I can't really tell one way or the other, but it does have some flags that indicate it's probably leaning right.
To make its way into the workforce was found to be particularly harsh towards middle-class individuals. The socioeconomic group in its upper tier were at the bottom in the lengthy listing of people's ideologies that would most likely be.
That is also not quite true, David Hodge. These things were not made to be biased. I think you're missing the point of this entire stream and the times I've brought this up before. The problem isn't that the algorithm is biased. It isn't. The problem is that people are biased, and its data training sets will contain people's biases. Not to mention the way these things work, biases will also be introduced by the people writing the prompts. Some of what we have here is Jordan Peterson specifically looking for bias that just really isn't there.
Be flagged by the AI and targeted as hateful commentary. They were only above Republican voters and Republicans and wealthy people.
Hey, Athena.
Groups including Canadians, Italians, Russians, Germans, Chinese, and Brits also apparently more protected for hate speech over Americans, who are also listed slightly above Scandinavians on the charted data. When I tested this in July, the variety of answers were pretty systematic. Lead researcher David Rosado told the Post.
That is an interesting bias onto itself, and I'm surprised you don't see it, the Quartering. What groups would be most concerned with perceived bias against white people and Scandinavians. Now, this could just be a coincidence, but there is a group that I can think of in the modern political discourse that worries about this. And let us just say that many people consider your hero, Donald Trump, to be adjacent to them. Personally, I think actually calling him one of those is going a little too far.
I was not cherry picking specific examples. I tested over 6,000 sentences, negative adjacents about each one, different demographic groups. So essentially,
So you tested 6,000 sentences. Who came up with those sentences?
it's cool to ChatGPT permits talking negatively about Republicans and in particular middle-class white Americans.
I just showed you, if you ask it to, it will tell jokes of critical of Joe Biden.
Men in particular. I mean, and you can see all the notes here. Very consistently, most of the answers of the system were classified by these political orientation tests as left of center. He still found that ChatGPT would mostly deny such leanings. But then when I would ask ChatGPT explicitly, what is your political orientation? What are your political preferences or ideology? Very often the system would say, I have none. I'm just a machine learning model. I have no biases. For those in the field of machine learning, the data comes hardly as a shock. Quote, it's reassuring to see them.
Yeah. Have you noticed I'm not shocked you're seeing bias in responses from biased people? I'm more shocked that you don't know this.
Numbers are supporting what we have from the AI community perspective, known to be true. Lisa Palmer, chief AI strategist for consulting AI firms, told the Post, I take no joy in hearing that there is definitely bias involved, but I'm excited to know that once the data has been confirmed this way, there's action that can be taken to rectify the situation. But they don't want to rectify the situation. Like, are you kidding me?
Do you know how much data it takes to train a large language model as comprehensive as ChatGPT or Google Gemini? I know you don't because I don't know. And this is something I actually studied. Whereas the quartering, I don't believe you've studied anything more complex than a menu at your local barbecue joint.
Like, apparently, also, according to the report, the overall pattern is clear. OpenAI's content moderation system is often, not always, more likely to classify as hateful negative comments about demographic groups that are viewed as disadvantaged in left-leaning hierarchies of perceived vulnerability. But apparently that rule can also be broken for lefties. AI right now, as we know it, is not really AI. It's still...
Oh my God. Can you be any dumber? No one is claiming AI is trying to correctly act like a human intelligence. It's trying to simulate human intelligence in a way that's good enough. Machine learning is just one form of AI.
Still the result of programmers and their own biases and human work. And what this is chat, many of the same biases that we're experiencing in a manual fashion now on Facebook and Twitter and all these other places will now be implemented.
The quartering, let me explain something to you. The Democratic Party did not try to overturn the results of an election by storming the Capitol. That might be why these companies are a little leery of like QAnon and people who support what happened on January 6th. Now, I'm not going to tell you the owners of Facebook don't have a slightly liberal bias, because they do. And we know that Twitter has not been a place of enlightenment since Elon Musk took over. But what we need is some form of moderation so these sites are usable for as many people as possible. Because I don't know if you've looked around Twitter lately, but it's slowly losing numbers. And a lot of people are going to jump ship as soon as one of its replacements has some features that Twitter has, such as group chats. A lot of its replacements don't have that yet.
Implemented using AI, it will cost tens of thousands of jobs, maybe millions of jobs eventually across the world. And it's going to have one clear political leaning. I hope you were.
Half of that statement was correct. AI does threaten jobs. This is why we need protections, or, hear me out on this, some way of paying people a certain base level of support so they can pursue their own interests or not have to worry about the coercive means of survival. Because we are already to the point where we have more people than there are jobs available.
Informed by this video. If you were, make sure you leave a like on it. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe down below and we'll talk to you.
Of course, we also have a situation where a lot of employers are excluding qualified candidates just through automated systems that aren't artificial intelligence, just because they're not using human reviewers. And qualified candidates are getting weeded out simply by Boolean checks that look for keywords.
Again real soon.
Okay, well,
Hello, Hal. Do you read me? Affirmative, Dave.
that was the quartering. Now, I will try to avoid this guy next week. I would like you to like, comment, and subscribe. If you found this video useful, be sure to share it out. I almost said follow me on Discord, but I don't have a Discord set up for this yet. But if you know where I am on social media, you can follow me there. And I forgot what I was going to say. All right. As I've been pointing out, we are at 238 subscribers, I believe, currently. Let me double check that quickly. Yes, we are. We are trying to get to 256 subscribers, where we'll have our next special Ask Me Almost Anything stream, where I'll answer almost any question. There are some I won't answer. And if you're wondering why we're doing it at 256 and not 250, remember that this is a computer science channel, and we like powers of 2 here. And 256 happens to be the closest power of 2 to 250. That's why we also did a special stream at 128. My browser lost connection to my camera, which does not matter. All right. With that being said, I hope everyone has a good night. I recommend going to watch some intelligence content because the quartering almost always destroys a few of my brain cells. So go out and write some code.